Here's the truth: most people will never think like entrepreneurs. They want safety, stability, and approval. But the entrepreneurs who change the world, they think differently. Steve Jobs didn't just build products, he built a reality. He had dark lessons that most people would shy away from, but they were the very fuel that made him unstoppable. If you want to think like an entrepreneur, you must step into that same mindset. Most people wake up in the morning, look around at their world, and accept it exactly as it is. They think reality is fixed. They believe the rules are written in stone, that circumstances cannot be bent, that life is a box, and they must live within its walls. But entrepreneurs, the true ones, the world changers, don't see walls. They see possibilities. They refuse to accept the limits that everyone else quietly obeys. And no one embodied that more than Steve Jobs. Steve had something people called the reality distortion field. It was a phrase used half in awe, half in frustration, because what it meant was simple. He could make people believe in something impossible. He could walk into a room, hear an engineer say, "That can't be done," and with a single sentence, with the sheer intensity of his belief, he could bend that person's mind until the impossible became inevitable. That was his gift, and that's the dark lesson hidden inside it. To think like an entrepreneur, you must distort reality, not submit to it. Think about this. When the first Macintosh was being designed, Jobs demanded that the boot uptime be cut down drastically. The engineer protested, saying it couldn't be done. Jobs leaned in and asked, "If you could save someone's life by shaving 10 seconds off this, could you do it?" The engineer admitted yes. Jobs replied, "Then you can do it, because saving millions of people 10 seconds of their lives, that adds up to lives saved." It was manipulative. It was intense. And yet, it forced people to realize the limits weren't technological. The limits were mental. This is the first shift in entrepreneurial thinking. Most people live inside boundaries built by other people. Entrepreneurs tear those boundaries apart. They don't ask, "Is this possible?" They ask, "What needs to happen to make this possible?" Jobs knew that vision comes first, logic comes second. You don't start with what's realistic. You start with what you demand reality to become. When you think like this, you stop treating the world as a cage. You start treating it as clay, something you can mold, something you can stretch, something you can push beyond recognition, until it becomes what you saw in your head. That's why entrepreneurs are dangerous. They don't obey reality. They reprogram it. But here's where it gets dark. The reality distortion field wasn't just a trick played on engineers. It was a trick Jobs played on himself. He convinced himself that limitations didn't matter. He blinded himself to excuses, and sometimes to pain, sometimes even to the human cost. He burned bridges. He frustrated people. He demanded beyond what seemed reasonable. And yet, that very blindness to limitation is what produced breakthroughs that ordinary, comfortable people never could. If you want to think like an entrepreneur, you must learn to create your own reality distortion field. It's not about lying. It's not about delusion. It's about choosing to believe in a version of the future so strongly that others can't help but be pulled into your vision. It's about making doubt a non-negotiable. The world will tell you no 1,000 times. Your job is to say yes, so loudly, so relentlessly, that the no starts to crumble. And here's the uncomfortable truth. People will call you unrealistic. They'll label you arrogant. They'll say you're detached from reality. And in a sense, they're right. Because if you want to think like an entrepreneur, you must be detached from their version of reality. The only reality that matters is the one you're building, the one you're demanding into existence. Jobs once said, "The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." That wasn't marketing. That wasn't a slogan. That was his operating system. It was the belief that reality is not a dictator. It's a negotiator. And if you push hard enough, if you refuse to back down, you can force it to give you what you want. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "That can't be done," stop. Ask yourself, can't be done by whom? Can't be done with what mindset? Can't be done under whose rules? Reality isn't fixed, it's flexible. And the entrepreneur is the one who dares to bend it. There's a word most people run away from, a word they've been taught to fear: obsession. Teachers warn against it. Parents caution their children about it. Society paints it as dangerous, unhealthy, something to be avoided at all costs. But the truth is, obsession is the fuel of entrepreneurship. It's the hidden engine that powers every world-changing idea, every breakthrough, every revolution. Steve Jobs didn't just understand this, he embodied it. When Jobs built Apple, he wasn't satisfied with making computers that worked. He wanted them to be beautiful, almost like works of art. He obsessed over the shade of gray on the screen. He obsessed over the way a box opened, the way a font appeared, the way glass curved against aluminum. To an ordinary person, these details seem trivial. To Jobs, they were everything. Because to him, the product wasn't just a machine. It was an experience. It was an extension of human creativity. And if one piece of that experience wasn't perfect, then none of it was. That's where most people give up. They compromise. They settle. They say, "Good enough." But entrepreneurs who think like Jobs don't stop there. They keep pushing. They keep grinding. They keep questioning until every last detail aligns with their vision. It's not comfortable. It's not easy. And yes, it drives people mad. But obsession is the price of greatness. There's a story about the early days of the Macintosh. Jobs demanded that even the inside of the computer, the parts no one would ever see, be designed beautifully. When engineers pushed back, asking why it mattered, Jobs said, "Because you'll know." That's an obsession. It's not about appearances. It's about integrity. It's about building something excellent in every possible dimension, even in the shadows, even in the places no one else will look. Most people don't think this way because obsession is uncomfortable. It means late nights, endless revisions, restless energy that won't let you sleep until it feels right. It means walking away from something everyone else praises, because deep down, you know it's not yet perfect. To outsiders, it looks irrational, maybe even self-destructive. But to the entrepreneur, obsession is clarity. It's the voice that whispers, "Keep going, it can be better. Don't stop now." And here's the dark truth. Obsession comes with a cost. Jobs sacrificed relationships, friendships, and at times his own health in pursuit of his vision. He pushed people beyond their limits. He was relentless, sometimes brutally so. But that same relentless obsession gave the world the iPhone, the iPod, and the Mac, tools that reshaped entire industries, tools that changed the way billions of people live. Would that have happened without obsession? No, because compromise never creates revolutions. Only obsession does. If you want to think like an entrepreneur, you have to ask yourself a hard question. What are you willing to be consumed by? Because obsession will consume you. It will make you think about your idea in the shower, at dinner, and in your dreams. It will pull you out of bed at 3 a.m. with a spark of insight you can't ignore. It will make you seem distant to others, strange even, because your mind is somewhere else, locked onto the thing you are building. And that's exactly where it needs to be. Most people will tell you balance is the goal. But balance doesn't change the world. Balance doesn't create legacies. Balance doesn't invent the future. Obsession does. Entrepreneurs live in extremes. They go further, dig deeper, push harder, because they're not satisfied with working. They want it perfect. They want it breathtaking. They want it unforgettable. So when you hear the word obsession, don't run from it. Don't fear it. Ask yourself how you can channel it. How can you let it burn through you and force you to create something that endures? That was Steve Jobs' dark power. He didn't run from obsession. He embraced it. He lived inside it. And because of that, he built things the world never imagined it needed, but now cannot imagine living without. Human beings are wired to seek approval. From childhood, we're conditioned to chase praise, to follow rules, to gain validation from teachers, parents, bosses, and society at large. Most people spend their entire lives trapped in that cycle, fearing rejection, craving applause, measuring their worth by the reactions of others. But entrepreneurs who change the world think differently. They learn to detach from approval. They understand that you cannot build something extraordinary if your every move is guided by the need to be liked. Steve Jobs lived by this truth. Jobs was not a man who cared about being popular in the moment. He wasn't concerned with whether people approved of his methods, his personality, or even his products at first. What he cared about was the vision. He once said, "I'm here to put a dent in the universe." That wasn't the mindset of someone chasing applause. That was the mindset of someone willing to be misunderstood, doubted, even hated, if it meant making that dent. In the early days of Apple, Jobs was relentless about his vision. He argued, he clashed, he rejected compromise. Many who worked with him described him as abrasive, even cruel at times. But here's the paradox: those same people, years later, admitted they did the best work of their lives under his leadership. Why? Because Jobs wasn't there to make them feel comfortable. He wasn't there to win their approval. He was there to pull greatness out of them, even if it meant being the villain in the story. That's the darkness of entrepreneurship that most people aren't ready for. If you want to think like an entrepreneur, you must be willing to walk into a room, share an idea, and stand there while everyone shakes their head, while people laugh, while people say it's impossible. You must keep standing, keep speaking, keep believing, even when no one claps for you, especially when no one claps for you. Jobs understood this on a visceral level. He launched products that people initially mocked. The Macintosh was seen as a toy. The iPod was dismissed as pointless. The iPhone was ridiculed by competitors. And yet, Jobs didn't flinch. He didn't pivot his vision because of their disapproval. He detached from the noise and trusted the clarity of what he saw. Because entrepreneurs aren't guided by the crowd. They guide the crowd. There's a danger when you seek approval. You dilute yourself. You water down your vision to avoid conflict, to avoid discomfort. You make something safe, something average, something everyone accepts, and no one remembers. Approval becomes a prison, and most people choose to live inside it. But entrepreneurs, the rare ones, break out. They don't ask for permission. They don't wait for validation. They move forward with or without applause. Jobs often said that focus meant saying no, but focus also meant saying no to approval. He didn't need to be the nice guy. He didn't need the world to clap. He needed to build something that would last. And that meant being comfortable with silence, with rejection, with being seen as difficult, even dangerous. That's what detachment from approval really is. It's freedom. If you want to think like an entrepreneur, you need to stop asking, "Do they like me?" and start asking, "Does this move the vision forward?" You need to stop shaping your ideas to please others and start shaping them to disrupt others. You need to be willing to walk alone, to be doubted, to be resisted. Because the truth is, no one will approve of you until after you've already won. That's the pattern history repeats. Every innovator, every disruptor, every entrepreneur who left a mark was mocked before they were celebrated. They were criticized before they were praised. They were doubted before they were admired. And they only got there because they stopped living for approval. Steve Jobs once said, "Innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower." What he didn't say, but what his life revealed, is that approval belongs to followers. Detachment belongs to leaders. If you want to lead, you have to give up the addiction to being liked. You have to be willing to carry the weight of disapproval, to absorb the criticism, to endure the mockery, because you know something they don't. You see what they can't yet see. And when the world finally catches up, when the vision becomes reality, when the same people who doubted you line up to celebrate you, you'll realize the truth. Approval was never the fuel. Approval was never the point. It was the vision all along. One of the most difficult truths about entrepreneurship is this: not everything deserves to survive. Not every idea deserves life. Not every project should continue. Not every person belongs on the journey. Most people don't want to face this truth because it feels cold, it feels harsh, it feels ruthless. But Steve Jobs understood that without strategic ruthlessness, vision collapses under the weight of compromise. When Jobs returned to Apple in the late 1990s, the company was drowning. They had dozens of products scattered across categories, a bloated line up with no clarity, no focus, no soul. Jobs walked in and did what few leaders would dare to do. He cut almost everything. He killed projects that teams had spent years working on. He eliminated products that still made money. He stripped the company down to its core, focusing only on what could redefine Apple's future. People were angry. Some were devastated. But that ruthless clarity saved the company. Without it, Apple would not have survived. That's the lesson. Entrepreneurs must learn to wield the knife. They must learn to say no, not once, not twice, but relentlessly. Jobs often said, "Focus is about saying no," and he lived by it. To think like an entrepreneur, you must become ruthless about protecting the vision. If something doesn't serve it, no matter how shiny, no matter how attached you are, it has to go. This kind of ruthlessness isn't cruelty. It's discipline. It's the recognition that energy, time, and resources are finite. Every yes to the wrong thing steals life away from the right thing. Every ounce of energy spent on distractions weakens the work that matters most. Most people struggle with this. They hold on to every idea. They keep every option open. They try to please everyone, and in doing so, they dilute everything. Entrepreneurs think differently. They cut deep. They simplify. They sacrifice. Jobs was ruthless not just with products, but with people. He believed that a small team of A players was worth more than an army of mediocrity. If someone wasn't aligned, if they couldn't meet the standard, if they didn't share the obsession, he cut them out. To outsiders, it seemed merciless. But to Jobs, it was survival. A vision cannot afford to be carried by those who don't believe in it fully. And entrepreneurs who want to build something lasting must learn this truth as well. There's a darkness to this way of thinking, because it means you must be willing to let go of things you love. It means walking away from projects you poured yourself into. It means making decisions that break hearts, including your own. But that's what separates entrepreneurs from dreamers. Dreamers keep everything alive until it all crumbles. Entrepreneurs cut until only the strongest, clearest, most powerful vision remains. Think about the iPhone. It wasn't born from adding more. It was born from stripping away. Jobs eliminated the keyboard. He eliminated complexity. He eliminated every distraction that didn't serve the purity of the idea. That's strategic ruthlessness. It's not about destruction for its own sake. It's about clarity. It's about saying no to 1,000 things so you can say yes to the one thing that changes everything. Most people will never do this. They're too attached. They're too afraid of loss. They're too worried about disappointing others. But to think like an entrepreneur, you must embrace the knife. You must become comfortable with sacrifice. You must be willing to kill what's good to create what's great. Jobs understood that true vision requires hard edges. It requires protecting the core at all costs. That's why his decisions often shocked those around him. That's why he seemed uncompromising, even brutal. But he wasn't playing for comfort. He was playing for legacy. And legacy isn't built by keeping everything. It's built by choosing what must survive and cutting everything else away. To think like an entrepreneur is to live in a different state of mind. It is to see reality not as a prison, but as clay waiting to be molded. It is to let obsession drive you when others settle for compromise. It is to walk without the applause of the crowd, detached from their approval, carrying only the weight of your vision. And it is to wield the ruthless clarity of focus, cutting away everything that does not serve the mission. Steve Jobs didn't just teach these lessons, he lived them. He bent reality to his will. He embraced obsession until it consumed him. He refused to chase approval, and he never hesitated to cut away what was unnecessary. These were his darkest powers, the lessons most people are too afraid to learn. But they are also the very lessons that allowed him to shape the world. If you want to think like an entrepreneur and build something that matters, you cannot afford to think like everyone else. You must dare to distort, to obsess, to detach, to cut. You must be willing to step into the darkness where comfort dies and vision is born. Because it is there, in that space beyond fear, beyond approval, beyond compromise, where true entrepreneurship begins.